The bone-chilling scream pierced the night as Violet Dawson crashed into the storage room of the Silver Dollar Saloon, her trembling hands clutching a shattered whiskey bottle. Blood trickled down her forearm, mixing with tears that fell unbidden from her swollen eyes. This wasn't the first time Vernon Blackstone had unleashed his rage upon her, but tonight something inside Violet had finally snapped. 3 years of abuse at the hands of the saloon owner had hardened parts of her soul while leaving others terrifyingly fragile. Violet pressed her back against the wall, listening for footsteps. At 22, she had already lived several lifetimes of hardship since arriving in Marysville, Montana Territory in 1876. What had started as a desperate bid for employment as a barmaid had evolved into a prison of fear and obligation. "You ungrateful little," Vernon's voice boomed from the hallway. "You think you can just walk away when I'm talking to you?" Violet's heart hammered against her ribs. There was no escape from the storage room except through the door Vernon was rapidly approaching. She gripped the broken bottle tighter, willing herself to use it if necessary. The door burst open, revealing Vernon's imposing figure, his face contorted with rage and alcohol. At 47, he maintained the strength that had made him feared throughout Marysville. "Please," Violet whispered, raising the jagged bottle. "Don't come any closer." Vernon laughed, a hollow, frightening sound. "You think you can threaten me in my own establishment?" He stepped forward, reaching for her arm. "Nobody leaves until I say they." The sound of the storage room's outer door slamming open cut Vernon's threat short. A tall figure stood silhouetted in the doorway, hat pulled low over his eyes, but not low enough to hide the dangerous intensity in his gaze. "The lady asked you not to come closer," the newcomer said, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. Vernon whirled around. "This ain't your business, Lawson. This is between me and my employee." Violet recognized the stranger immediately. Adam Lawson had ridden into Marysville 3 days prior, causing quite the stir among the townspeople. Rumor had it he was a former Texas Ranger turned bounty hunter, though he kept mostly to himself, taking a room at the boarding house and spending evenings at the saloon, nursing a single whiskey for hours while observing the room with watchful eyes. "When a man puts his hands on a woman that way, it becomes everybody's business," Adam replied, stepping fully into the room. His gaze shifted to Violet, noting the purple-yellow bruises blooming across her exposed forearms, the fresh cut on her cheek. Something dangerous flickered across his face. Vernon's hand moved toward the gun at his hip. "I paid good money bringing this girl here from back east. She's got a debt to work off." Adam didn't flinch. "Whatever arrangement you had is finished as of now." He addressed Violet directly. "Miss, you're done working for him." The simplicity of his declaration stole Violet's breath. 3 years of servitude dismissed in 8 words. She straightened her spine, though her legs threatened to buckle beneath her. "She ain't going nowhere," Vernon snarled, drawing his gun. In a movement almost too quick to follow, Adam's revolver appeared in his hand. "I wouldn't." Vernon froze, his survival instinct finally overriding his rage. "You're making a powerful enemy, Lawson. Wouldn't be the first time." Adam's focus remained steady. "Miss, please step toward me." Violet hesitated only briefly before making her choice. With the broken bottle still clutched in her hand, she inched along the wall until she stood just behind Adam's shoulder. "This ain't over," Vernon growled. "For tonight it is," Adam replied evenly. "Tomorrow we'll discuss settling whatever legitimate debts exist. In the meantime, the lady won't be returning to work." Vernon spat on the floor. "Take the whore then. She ain't worth the trouble." Adam's jaw tightened, but his gun hand remained steady. "We're leaving now." "I suggest you stay put for a while, cool that temper." Backing slowly toward the door, Adam guided Violet into the alley behind the saloon. The cool night air hit her face and she sucked in a desperate breath, reality crashing around her. "Where will I go?" she whispered, more to herself than to Adam. "Everything I own is in a room upstairs." Adam holstered his weapon. "First, we need to tend to your injuries, then we can figure out the rest." He removed his duster and placed it gently around her shoulders. "Can you walk to the doctor's?" Violet nodded, though her entire body felt like it might shatter into pieces. "Why are you helping me?" Adam's expression softened slightly. "Some things a man can't abide witnessing. A woman being beaten is one of them." They moved through the quiet streets of Marysville, the occasional lantern illuminating their path. Founded during the gold rush of the 1860s, the town had settled into a rough equilibrium between lawlessness and civilization. The newly appointed sheriff maintained order on the main street during daylight hours, but establishments like the Silver Dollar operated by their own rules. Dr. Michael Granger answered his door on the third knock, his gray hair disheveled, spectacles perched precariously on his nose. His eyes widened at the sight of Violet. "Vernon again?" he asked simply. Violet nodded, shame coloring her cheeks. This wasn't her first visit to the doctor after one of Vernon's outbursts. "Bring her in, Mr. Lawson." The doctor stepped aside, already gathering supplies. Adam guided her to a chair in the examining room, then stepped back, removing his hat. "I'll wait outside to give you privacy." "No," Violet said quickly, surprising herself. "Please stay." The thought of being alone, even with the kind doctor, sent panic coursing through her. Adam nodded, taking a position against the wall, his hat in his hands. Dr. Granger worked efficiently, cleaning the cut on her cheek, examining the bruises on her arms and the older ones hidden beneath her clothing. He wrapped her sprained wrist and provided a tonic for the pain. "You can't go back there, Violet," the doctor said firmly. "One of these days he'll go too far." "She won't be returning," Adam stated, his tone brooking no argument. The doctor raised an eyebrow. "And how do you propose to prevent that?" "Vernon Blackstone has the mayor in his pocket and enough hired guns to make even our sheriff cautious." "I'll handle Blackstone," Adam replied. "Right now, the lady needs a safe place to sleep." Dr. Granger sighed. "My wife would offer our spare room, but with her sister visiting from Helena." "I have nowhere," Violet admitted, the reality of her situation settling cold in her stomach. "Vernon will have already cleared out my room upstairs." "Mrs. Henderson at the boarding house might help," the doctor suggested. "She's no friend of Vernon since he ran her son out of town last year." Adam nodded. "I'm staying there myself. I'll speak with her." 30 minutes later, Violet found herself in a small but clean room at Henderson's boarding house, a basin of warm water and fresh nightclothes provided by the sympathetic proprietress. Mrs. Henderson, a stern-faced widow with kind eyes, had taken one look at Violet's bruised face and welcomed her without question. "Mr. Lawson explained the situation," she'd said. "Any woman brave enough to walk away from Vernon Blackstone deserves a helping hand." Now, sitting on the edge of the narrow bed, Violet stared at her reflection in the small mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger, hollow-eyed, bruised, but somehow still alive. A soft knock at the door startled her. "Miss Dawson, it's Adam Lawson." Violet wrapped a shawl Mrs. Henderson had provided around her shoulders before opening the door a crack. Adam stood in the hallway, his tall frame seeming too large for the narrow space. "I wanted to check that you have everything you need," he said, keeping his voice low. "More than I deserve for a stranger to provide," Violet replied. "I don't know how to thank you." "No thanks necessary." Adam shifted his weight. "I'll be speaking with Blackstone tomorrow about your situation. Is there anything I should know?" Violet hesitated. He brought me here from Philadelphia after my parents died. Said he'd give me honest work and a fresh start. The debt he claims I owe is for my passage west, room and board, and—" She swallowed hard, protection from other men who might have designs on a young woman alone. Adam's expression darkened. "And did he protect you from himself?" "Not for long." Violet's voice was barely audible. "By the time I realized what kind of man he was, I was already trapped. No money, no connections, nowhere to go." "What would you do if you were free of him?" Adam asked. The question caught her by surprise. No one had asked what she wanted in so long. I don't know. I was training to be a teacher before my parents died." Something like approval flickered in Adam's eyes. "Get some rest, Miss Dawson. Tomorrow's likely to be challenging, but you're not facing it alone." As the door closed behind him, Violet felt something unfamiliar bloom in her chest, a fragile hope she dared not trust. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through thin curtains. For a disorienting moment, Violet didn't recognize her surroundings. Then the events of the previous night crashed over her. She was no longer at the Silver Dollar, no longer under Vernon's thumb, at least temporarily. Mrs. Henderson had provided a simple but clean dress, and after washing up, Violet made her way downstairs. The boarding house dining room was mostly empty at this hour, save for Adam sitting at a corner table, nursing a cup of coffee. He stood when he saw her. "Miss Dawson, please join me." Violet slid into the chair opposite him, acutely aware of how different he looked in daylight, his features sharper, more defined. She guessed him to be in his early 30s, with lines at the corners of his eyes suggesting he'd seen his share of hardship. "How are you feeling this morning?" he asked. "Better than I expected," Violet admitted, "though I'm not sure what happens next." Mrs. Henderson approached with a plate of eggs and toast, setting it before Violet with a motherly pat on her shoulder. "Eat up, dear, you'll need your strength." After the older woman departed, Adam leaned forward. "I've been asking some questions around town. Vernon Blackstone has a reputation for bringing young women from back east, claiming they owe him for travel expenses, then keeping them in perpetual debt." Violet nodded, pushing eggs around her plate. "There were 3 others when I arrived. Martha left in a pine box last winter. Consumption, they said, but—" She shook her head. "Alice ran off with a cattle driver. No one's heard from her since. Only Rebecca remains." "This Rebecca, is she in immediate danger?" "Vernon doesn't hit her like he did me. She's more accommodating to his demands." Violet's cheeks flushed. "But she's not well. Laudanum for her nerves, Vernon says, though he's the one who provides the bottles." Adam's jaw tightened. "I'm meeting with Sheriff Davis this morning. From what I've gathered, he's a decent man but cautious about crossing Blackstone. The sheriff's wife shops at the general store where Rebecca's sister works," Violet offered. "He knows what happens at the Silver Dollar, but Vernon pays taxes that fund the town's improvements. Corruption wearing the mask of progress," Adam muttered. "Tale as old as the West itself." Violet finally met his eyes directly. "Why are you doing this, Mr. Lawson? You don't know me." Adam was quiet for a moment. "I've spent most of my adult life tracking men who think they are beyond justice's reach. Usually, I bring them in after they've already done their worst." He looked down at his coffee cup. "Sometimes it's good to prevent tragedy instead of just avenging it." His words carried the weight of personal experience, and Violet sensed there were stories he wasn't sharing. Before she could respond, the boarding house door opened, and Sheriff Davis himself entered, his weathered face grave. "Lawson," he acknowledged with a nod. "Miss Dawson." His eyes lingered on the visible bruises on her face. "I understand there was trouble at the Silver Dollar last night." "Nothing unusual," Violet replied softly. "Except this time someone intervened." The sheriff sighed, removing his hat. Vernon Blackstone is at my office demanding I arrest Mr. Lawson here for theft of property and interference with his business." Adam's expression didn't change. "Miss Dawson isn't property." "No, she ain't," the sheriff agreed, looking uncomfortable. "But Blackstone has documents claiming she owes him a considerable sum. In the territory, debt contracts can be legally binding." Violet's heart sank. She'd signed papers when she first arrived, desperate and grieving, barely reading the terms that now chained her. "May we see these documents?" Adam asked. The sheriff nodded. "That's why I'm here. Thought we might sort this out civilized-like without further disturbance. Blackstone's waiting at my office." Adam stood, offering Violet his hand. Ready to face him, the walk to the sheriff's office felt like a march to execution. Violet kept her eyes down, aware of the curious stares from townspeople. News traveled fast in Marysville, and she could only imagine what versions of last night's events were circulating. Vernon Blackstone stood when they entered, his expression thunderous. Despite her fear, Violet noticed how diminished he seemed in daylight, away from the power he wielded in his saloon. "There's my runaway investment," he sneered. "Feeling better after your hysterics, Violet?" Adam stepped slightly forward, positioning himself between them. "We're here to discuss the alleged debt, nothing more." Sheriff Davis retrieved papers from his desk. "These are the documents Mr. Blackstone provided, contract of employment and debt repayment." He handed them to Adam, who studied them carefully before passing them to Violet. The papers were familiar, her own hasty signature at the bottom of pages of dense legal text. 3 years ago, newly orphaned and desperate, she'd signed without understanding she was essentially selling herself into servitude. The terms indicate Miss Dawson owes $1,200 for transportation from Philadelphia, room, board, clothing, and miscellaneous expenses, the sheriff summarized, with interest accruing monthly. Adam's eyebrows rose. "That's an outrageous sum for bringing one young woman west." "Quality comes at a price," Vernon replied with a smirk that made Violet's stomach turn. "And she's been particularly costly to maintain, breaking glassware, displeasing customers. By refusing your more degrading demands," Violet found her voice, though it trembled. "I agreed to serve drinks and clean rooms, not to." She couldn't finish the sentence. Vernon waved a dismissive hand. "The contract states you would perform services as required, broad terms, legally binding." Adam was studying the document again. "Sheriff, would you say these terms constitute indentured servitude?" "That's a strong accusation," the sheriff replied carefully. "It's also illegal under federal law as of 1865, Adam pointed out. The 13th Amendment abolished not just slavery, but involuntary servitude except as punishment for crime." Vernon's face flushed with anger. "She signed willingly. Ask anyone I gave her a job when no one else would." "You took advantage of a grieving young woman with no protector," Adam replied evenly. "The courts might find the terms of this contract unconscionable and therefore unenforceable." Sheriff Davis looked troubled. "You'd need a proper judge to make that determination." "Circuit judge won't be through for another month at least." "Then Miss Dawson remains free until such time as a judge can review the case," Adam insisted. Vernon slammed his fist on the desk. "She owes me money. She doesn't leave town until I'm paid." "I'll guarantee she remains in Marysville until the matter is settled legally," Adam countered. "But she won't be returning to your employment." "And who'll compensate me for lost earnings in the meantime?" Vernon demanded. Adam reached into his vest pocket, removing a money clip. "How much does she actually earn you in an average week? Honest figures now." Vernon named a sum that made Violet wince far more than she'd ever seen of the money she supposedly earned. Without hesitation, Adam counted out bills, placing them on the sheriff's desk. That should cover a month with interest. By then, the judge will have ruled. Violet stared at him in shock. The amount represented a significant sum, certainly more than a stranger should be willing to pay on her behalf. Vernon eyed the money greedily. And if she runs? Then you keep the money and pursue whatever legal remedies you believe you're entitled to, Adam replied. But I suspect Miss Dawson is honorable enough to face this matter directly. Sheriff Davis looked between them, clearly relieved a solution had presented itself. Seems fair to me. Blackstone gets compensation, Miss Dawson gets breathing room, and we all wait for the circuit judge. Vernon snatched the money from the desk. Fine, but she stays away from the Silver Dollar, and Lawson, you've made an enemy today. I'll add you to the list, Adam replied coolly. As Vernon stormed out, Violet felt lightheaded with relief and confusion. Mr. Lawson, I can't possibly repay. Adam held up a hand. Consider it an advance. We need to find you proper employment so you can establish independence. Sheriff Davis cleared his throat. Speaking of which, Mrs. Davis mentioned just yesterday that the school teacher, Miss Winters, is looking for an assistant. Her student numbers have grown considerably since the new mining families arrived. Hope flickered in Violet's chest. I had almost completed my teaching certification in Philadelphia. Then it seems we have a direction, Adam said, his normally stern expression softening slightly. Sheriff, thank you for your fair handling of this situation. As they stepped back into the morning sunlight, Violet found herself speechless with gratitude and something else, a strange flutter in her chest, whenever she looked at her unlikely champion. Why don't we call on the schoolhouse now? Adam suggested. No time like the present to start rebuilding your life. For the first time in years, Violet felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. She wasn't free yet, but she could finally see a path forward, one that didn't include bruises and humiliation. Miss Eleanor Winters, the schoolteacher of Marysville, was a formidable woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair pulled into a severe bun and eyes that seemed to evaluate every aspect of a person at a glance. She listened to Violet's abbreviated history with keen attention, her gaze occasionally flicking to the visible bruises but making no comment about them. Philadelphia, you say? And you studied at the women's normal school there? Yes, madam, Violet confirmed. For nearly 2 years before my parents' passing. Miss Winters nodded thoughtfully. I have 32 students now, ages 6 to 15. Too many for one teacher to manage effectively, especially with the varying levels of education they arrive with. She fixed Violet with a penetrating stare. I require someone who can maintain discipline without cruelty, who understands that education is both privilege and necessity, and who won't be distracted by matrimonial prospects every 6 months. Violet straightened her spine. I assure you, Miss Winters, marriage is the furthest thing from my mind. I simply want honest work and the chance to build an independent life. Something like approval flickered in the older woman's eyes. Your situation at the Silver Dollar is known to me. This town whispers, Miss Dawson. I won't hold your past against you, but neither will I tolerate any behavior that brings disrepute to my school. You'll find Miss Dawson exemplary in her conduct, Adam interjected from where he stood near the door. Her circumstances were not of her choosing. Miss Winters regarded him with raised eyebrows. And you stand as her character reference, Mr. Lawson. A man the town knows little about beyond rumors of manhunting in Texas. I judge people by their actions and their fortitude, he replied evenly. Miss Dawson has shown remarkable strength in circumstances that would break many. The schoolteacher's expression softened marginally. Very well. I can offer room and board in my home, plus a modest salary. The position begins immediately. I have papers to grade and lessons to plan that have been sorely neglected." She turned back to Violet. "Can you start today?" Relief flooded through Violet. "Yes, madam. Gladly." "Then I suggest you gather your belongings and return by midday." The children arrive at 8 tomorrow morning. Miss Winters rose, signaling the interview was concluded. "And Miss Dawson, whatever demons chase you from your previous position, leave them at my door. My students deserve a teacher focused entirely on their education." "Yes, Miss Winters." "Thank you for this opportunity." Outside in the bright sunshine, Violet turned to Adam, words failing her. He simply nodded, understanding her gratitude without requiring its expression. "Let's collect your things from Mrs. Henderson's," he said. "I believe you have a new life to begin." Over the following weeks, Marysville witnessed the gradual transformation of Violet Dawson. The bruises faded from her skin as new purpose colored her days. Under Miss Winters' exacting tutelage, she rediscovered her passion for education, spending evenings preparing lessons and grading assignments. Adam Lawson, meanwhile, remained in town an unusual duration for a man of his typically transient profession. He took odd jobs, helping at the livery stable and occasionally riding with the mail coach as security when threats of robbery emerged. Sheriff Davis even deputized him temporarily during a tense situation with cattle rustlers passing through the area. Though their paths crossed regularly in the small town, Adam maintained a respectful distance, tipping his hat when they met on the street, occasionally inquiring after her students during chance encounters at the general store. Violet found herself looking forward to these brief interactions, each one adding another small piece to her understanding of the mysterious man who had changed her life's trajectory. One evening in early October, Violet was returning from a late parent meeting when she encountered Adam outside the town's small lending library, a book in his hands. "Mr. Lawson," she greeted him with a smile that came more easily now. "I didn't take you for a literary man." He returned the smile, holding up the volume. "Whitman, Leaves of Grass, not everyone's choice, but it speaks to something in me." Surprise registered on her face. "You enjoy poetry. Is that so difficult to believe?" A hint of amusement touched his eyes. "A man can appreciate both firearms and verse, Miss Dawson." "Of course," she replied, feeling her cheeks warm. "I didn't mean to suggest. That is, I'm learning not to make assumptions about people based on appearances." A valuable lesson. He gestured toward the road leading to Miss Winters' house. "May I walk with you? The hour's growing late." They strolled in companionable silence for a moment before Violet spoke again. "I never properly thanked you for everything you've done." "Your success is thanks enough," Adam replied. "The children speak highly of you. Even old Harriet Simmons mentioned how much her grandson has improved in his reading." Violet's eyebrows rose. "You've been asking about my teaching." He looked slightly abashed. "I've invested in your future, Miss Dawson." "It's natural to take interest in the returns." "Is that what I am? An investment?" The question emerged more sharply than she intended. Adam stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "No, you're a remarkable woman who deserved better than what life handed you. I merely provided an opportunity for you to prove what I already suspected, that given freedom and respect, you would thrive." His words sent an unexpected warmth through her chest. "The circuit judge arrives next week," she said quietly. "Vernon has been telling everyone he'll have me back at the saloon before the month is out." Adam's expression hardened. "That won't happen. You can't know that." Violet wrapped her shawl tighter against the evening chill. "The law might not be on my side." "If the law fails, there are other options." Something in his tone made her look up sharply. You could leave Marysville, start fresh somewhere your past won't follow. Run away. The very suggestion offended her newfound pride. I've been running since my parents died. I'm done with that life. Adam studied her face in the fading light. Your courage continues to surprise me, Miss Dawson. They had reached Miss Winter's gate. Violet hesitated, reluctant to end their conversation. Will you be at the hearing? Wild horses couldn't keep me away, he assured her with a small smile. Get some rest. Whatever comes, you won't face it alone. As she watched him walk back toward town, Violet acknowledged the truth she'd been avoiding for weeks. Her feelings for Adam Lawson had grown far beyond gratitude. The realization terrified and exhilarated her in equal measure. The arrival of Judge Emmett Harding brought Marysville to a heightened state of anticipation. The circuit judge's visits were always notable events, but the case of Vernon Blackstone versus Violet Dawson had divided the town into vocal factions. Those who depended on the Silver Dollar's business supported Vernon's claims of theft and breach of contract. Others, particularly the women who had witnessed Violet's transformation into a respected teacher, rallied behind her right to freedom. The hearing was held in the town hall, packed to capacity with curious onlookers. Violet sat rigidly beside Adam and Miss Winters, who had insisted on attending to provide moral and professional support. Across the aisle, Vernon lounged with calculated casualness, flanked by his barkeeper and a lawyer brought in from Helena. Judge Harding, a stout man with bushy white sideburns and piercing blue eyes, called the proceedings to order with 3 sharp raps of his gavel. This court will now hear the matter of Blackstone versus Dawson regarding alleged breach of contract and unpaid debts, he announced. I understand strong feelings exist on both sides, but I expect decorum throughout these proceedings. Vernon's lawyer presented their case first, painting a picture of Violet as an opportunistic woman who had accepted Vernon's charity, only to abandon her obligations when a more appealing prospect appeared. He emphasized the significant financial investment Vernon had made and the legally binding nature of the contract Violet had signed. When it was Violet's turn to speak, she rose on trembling legs but with her chin held high. She recounted her arrival in Marysville young, grief-stricken, and desperate, and how Vernon had gradually revealed the true nature of her employment. She spoke of the escalating abuse, the impossibility of repaying a debt that mysteriously grew despite her labor, and finally, of the night Adam Lawson had intervened when Vernon's violence threatened her life. Your Honor, she concluded, her voice steady despite the tears threatening to fall, I acknowledge I signed Mr. Blackstone's contract. I was naive and vulnerable. But no contract should bind a person to abuse, nor prevent them from seeking honest work and a life of dignity. Vernon scoffed audibly, earning a sharp look from the judge. Adam spoke next, presenting his legal argument that the contract constituted illegal indentured servitude and was therefore void under federal law. He also produced ledgers obtained through means he didn't specify showing Vernon's accounting of Violet's supposed debt, revealing inflated charges and arbitrary interest. The judge listened attentively, occasionally asking pointed questions of both parties. When the presentations concluded, he called for a brief recess to consider his ruling. Outside the town hall, Violet paced nervously while Adam watched her with concern. Whatever happens, he said quietly, remember you have options. Before she could respond, a commotion near the street drew their attention. Rebecca Taylor, the remaining girl from the Silver Dollar, was hurrying toward them, her face pale with fear. Violet, she called, her voice thin and reedy from years of laudanum. I need to speak to the judge. Vernon, he's planning something if the ruling goes against him. Adam stepped forward. "What kind of something, Miss Taylor?" Rebecca glanced around nervously. "He told Saul to ready the wagon for tonight. Said if the law wouldn't uphold his property rights, he'd take matters into his own hands." Her eyes met Violet's. "He means to force you back to the saloon or worse." Cold dread washed over Violet. "We need to tell the sheriff." "Sheriff Davis left town this morning to transfer a prisoner to Helena," Adam said grimly. "Convenient timing." When Judge Harding reconvened the hearing, Rebecca insisted on testifying despite Vernon's venomous glares. She confirmed everything Violet had claimed about conditions at the Silver Dollar and added her own harrowing experiences. Finally, she revealed Vernon's threats should the ruling go against him. The judge listened with increasing gravity before delivering his verdict. "The contract between Mr. Blackstone and Miss Dawson is hereby declared null and void," he pronounced. "It contains provisions that no court in this land could reasonably enforce post-emancipation, and evidence suggests it was enacted under conditions of significant duress." Relief flooded through Violet, but the judge wasn't finished. "Furthermore, I find Mr. Blackstone's business practices regarding young women brought west under similar arrangements deeply troubling. I am ordering an immediate investigation into all such contracts, past and present." He fixed Vernon with a steely gaze. "And given testimony about threats of retribution, I am issuing a restraining order prohibiting Mr. Blackstone from approaching or communicating with Miss Dawson." Vernon's face contorted with rage. "This is an outrage. She owes me." "One more outburst and you'll be held in contempt," Judge Harding warned. "Miss Dawson, you are free of any obligation to Mr. Blackstone. The money advanced by Mr. Lawson on your behalf is considered fair compensation for unpaid wages during your time at the Silver Dollar." As the gavel fell, finalizing the ruling, Violet felt a weight lift from her shoulders that she'd carried for 3 long years. Adam's hand found hers, squeezing gently in silent congratulation. Their celebration was short-lived. As they exited the town hall, Vernon shouldered roughly past them, hissing under his breath, "This isn't over. Not by a long shot." Adam stepped protectively closer. "We should get you somewhere secure until the deputy returns. Vernon's pride won't let this stand." "You can both stay at my home tonight," Miss Winters offered, having overheard. "My brother was a Union officer. I keep his service revolver in excellent condition." The offer was gratefully accepted. As dusk settled over Marysville, Adam, Violet, and Rebecca took refuge in Miss Winters' modest home at the edge of town. The schoolteacher proved surprisingly adept with firearms, checking her brother's revolver with practiced hands before placing it on the sideboard. 30 years on the frontier teaches a woman to be prepared," she remarked dryly. After a simple supper, they discussed their options. Rebecca, trembling from both fear and the early stages of laudanum withdrawal, decided to leave on the next stage to Helena, where her sister might help her start anew. Adam offered to escort her personally once the immediate danger had passed. "What about you, Violet?" Miss Winters asked. "Will you remain in Marysville now that your position is secure?" Violet glanced at Adam, who was looking out the window, vigilant for any approach. "I believe I will. I've found purpose here, and I refuse to be driven away by fear." Adam turned, meeting her gaze with quiet approval. Vernon's type usually backed down when confronted directly. Once his anger cools, he'll likely focus on his business rather than revenge. "I hope you're right," Violet replied, though uncertainty gnawed at her. The night passed tensely but without incident. As dawn broke, Adam prepared to make a circuit of the town to assess the situation. "Stay inside with the doors locked," he instructed. "I'll return within the hour. True to his word, Adam returned promptly, his expression grave. "Vernon's gone," he announced. "Cleared out of the Silver Dollar before dawn, took his cash box and personal items. His barkeep doesn't know where he went." "He's running?" Violet asked incredulously. "Or regrouping," Adam countered. "Either way, we should remain cautious." 2 days passed without sign of Vernon Blackstone. Rebecca departed for Helena under Adam's protection, returning the following day with news that she'd been safely reunited with her sister. Life in Marysville began returning to normal, though Violet noticed the townspeople treated her differently now, with a respect born of her courage in standing against Vernon and her growing reputation as an excellent teacher. Adam, however, grew increasingly restless. Violet observed it in his demeanor, the way he scanned horizons, the frequent checks of his sidearm, his reluctance to remain indoors for long. One evening, as they walked from the schoolhouse where he'd insisted on escorting her after classes, she finally addressed it directly. "You're planning to leave, aren't you?" she asked, keeping her tone neutral despite the ache the question provoked. Adam's stride faltered slightly. "There's a job waiting in Wyoming Territory. A marshal there telegraphed about a fugitive they've tracked to the Bighorn Mountains." "I see." Violet focused on the road ahead, unwilling to let him see her disappointment. "When will you go?" "I've delayed responding," he admitted. "Wanted to be certain Vernon was truly gone and you were safe." They reached Miss Winter's gate and Violet turned to face him fully. "I've survived Vernon Blackstone. I'll survive your departure as well, Mr. Lawson." Something flickered in his eyes, regret perhaps, or an emotion she dared not name. "Violet," he said softly, the first time he'd used her given name. "I'm not a man who can offer permanence. The life I've chosen doesn't allow for it." "I didn't ask you for anything," she replied with dignity, though her heart clamored otherwise. "You've done more than enough, and I'll always be grateful." "Gratitude isn't what I want from you," he said, the words seeming to surprise even him. Before she could respond, a shot rang out from the direction of town. They both instinctively ducked, Adam drawing his pistol in one fluid motion. "Get inside," he ordered, his voice transformed to steel. "Lock the door and stay away from windows." Violet hesitated only briefly before complying, watching from the doorway as Adam moved swiftly back toward town, his figure soon swallowed by gathering dusk. Inside, she found Miss Winters already alert, her brother's revolver in hand. "Trouble?" the older woman asked simply. "A shot from town," Violet confirmed. Adam went to investigate. Miss Winters nodded, betraying no fear. "Then we wait, and we prepare." Minutes stretched into an hour with no word from Adam. Violet's imagination conjured increasingly dire scenarios. Vernon returned for vengeance, Adam wounded or worse. When a knock finally came at the door, both women tensed. "Miss Winters." "Violet, it's Adam." Relief flooded through her as Violet rushed to unbolt the door. Adam stood on the threshold, unharmed but grim-faced. "Vernon's back," he announced without preamble. "Shot up the Silver Dollar, wounded his own barkeep who apparently helped himself to the till in Vernon's absence." "Is the man alive?" Miss Winters asked sharply. Adam nodded. "For now." "Vernon's holed up in the saloon with 2 hired guns. He's been drinking heavily and making threats specifically about you, Violet." Cold fear clenched her stomach, but Violet forced it down. "What's being done?" Deputy Miller's organized a few men, but they're hesitant to rush the place. "Vernon's claiming he'll burn it down with everyone inside before he surrenders." Adam's jaw tightened. "I need you both to pack essentials. I'm taking you to the Peterson Ranch outside town until this is resolved." "I will not be driven from my home by that monster," Miss Winters declared firmly. "Eleanor," Adam said, using the older woman's first name with gentle authority. This isn't about courage. Vernon's drunk and desperate. Those are the most dangerous conditions possible. The schoolteacher's resistance wavered. My students will need you alive to teach them once this is over, Adam finished. Please, both of you. Within 20 minutes, they were in a borrowed wagon heading toward the Peterson Ranch, a prosperous homestead 3 miles outside Marysville. James Peterson, a widower with 3 school-age children, welcomed them readily, having been forewarned by Adam's message. The children will be pleased to have their teacher staying with us, he assured Miss Winters. And Miss Dawson, my Emma speaks of you constantly. You've made quite an impression on my daughter. After settling the women, Adam prepared to return to town. Violet followed him outside to the wagon, unwilling to let him leave without speaking privately. You're going back to confront him, she said. It wasn't a question. Adam checked his revolver methodically. Vernon won't surrender to the deputy. He's got nothing left to lose. And you? Violet asked, her voice barely steady. What do you have to lose? His hand stilled, and he looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. More than I realized, he admitted quietly. Which is why I need to end this now before he can harm what I've come to value. The confession, oblique as it was, sent warmth blooming through her chest despite her fear. Promise me you'll be careful. I'm always careful, he replied with the ghost of a smile. It's how I've survived this long. Impulsively, Violet stepped forward and pressed her lips to his cheek, a fleeting touch before she stepped back. For luck, she whispered. Something in Adam's expression shifted, softened. For a moment, it seemed he might say more, might even pull her closer. Instead, he simply nodded, climbed into the wagon, and drove away into the deepening night. The hours that followed were among the longest of Violet's life. She helped with the Peterson children, read stories to distract them from the unusual circumstances. But her mind remained fixed on Marysville and what might be transpiring there. Shortly after midnight, the sound of approaching hoofbeats brought everyone to alertness. Mr. Peterson grabbed his shotgun, moving to the window. It's Deputy Miller, he announced with relief, opening the door. The deputy stumbled in, exhausted and grim. Vernon Blackstone is dead, he announced without preamble. Violet's heart seized. And Adam, Mr. Lawson. Wounded, but the doc says he'll pull through, the deputy replied. It was quite a scene, Miss Dawson. Blackstone set fire to the Silver Dollar just as he threatened. Lawson managed to get the hired guns to surrender, but Vernon came out shooting. Got Lawson in the shoulder before Lawson returned fire. The town? Miss Winters asked pragmatically. The fire contained to the saloon, thankfully. Half the men in town formed a bucket brigade. We saved the adjacent buildings, but the Silver Dollar is mostly cinders now. The deputy removed his hat, running a hand through sweat-matted hair. Blackstone was ranting about you, Miss Dawson, right up to the end. Said if he couldn't have you, he'd make sure no one would want you. Violet shuddered at the hatred that had consumed the man even in his final moments. I can take you back to town now if you wish, the deputy offered. It's safe enough. Most folks are just grateful no one else was seriously hurt. Dawn was breaking as they arrived back in Marysville. The acrid smell of smoke hung in the air, and the charred skeleton of the Silver Dollar stood as stark testament to Vernon Blackstone's final act of destruction. People moved through the streets, with the stunned expressions of those who had witnessed tragedy averted by the narrowest margin. Violet went directly to Dr. Granger's house, her heart pounding. The doctor's wife met her at the door with a tired smile. He's been asking for you, she said simply, leading Violet to a back bedroom. Adam lay propped against pillows, his left shoulder heavily bandaged, his face pale but alert. When he saw her, relief washed over his features. "You're safe," he said, as though confirming something he already knew but needed to hear. "As are you, thanks to God's mercy," she replied, moving to his bedside. "The deputy told us what happened." Adam grimaced. Vernon chose his ending. "I would have preferred to take him alive, let justice run its course." "Justice did run its course," Violet said firmly. "He defied the law and threatened innocent lives. You did what was necessary to protect others." His eyes searched her face. "You don't blame me. For what? Saving the town." "Ensuring Vernon can never hurt another woman." She shook her head. "I only blame myself for not finding the courage to leave sooner." "Courage wasn't what you lacked," Adam countered. "It was opportunity and support." They fell silent, the unspoken growing between them like a living thing. Finally, Violet gathered her resolve. "Your job in Wyoming," she began. "When will you be well enough to travel?" Adam's expression turned unreadable. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether I have reason to stay in Marysville." His gaze held hers steadily. "The marshal in Wyoming can find another manhunter. There are always men willing to chase bounties." Hope unfurled in Violet's chest. "And what would you do instead? If you stayed?" "Sheriff Davis mentioned needing a permanent deputy," Adam replied. "Someone who knows the law and can enforce it fairly. It's not the most exciting work compared to tracking fugitives, but it has certain advantages." "Such as?" Violet prompted, hardly daring to breathe. "Stability, community." His voice softened. "The chance to build something lasting with someone worth building for." Tears pricked at Violet's eyes. "That sounds like a significant change of direction for a man not accustomed to permanence." "I've discovered that some things are worth changing for." His good hand reached for hers, fingers intertwining. "Some people." Understanding bloomed between them, as natural and inevitable as sunrise after the longest night. Violet leaned forward, her free hand gently touching his face. "I think," she whispered, "that Marysville would be fortunate to have you as deputy. Almost as fortunate as I would be to have you remain." Their first kiss was gentle, mindful of his injury yet filled with promise of healing, of possibility, of a future neither had dared imagine before fate, and courage brought them together in a saloon storage room. The rebuilding of Marysville continued through autumn and into winter. The Silver Dollar site was purchased by a consortium of town businessmen and transformed into a respectable hotel and restaurant, one that employed fair wages and prohibited the exploitation that had characterized Vernon Blackstone's establishment. Adam recovered from his wound and officially accepted the position as Sheriff Davis's deputy. He proved as adept at preventing trouble as he had been at tracking those who caused it, earning respect from townspeople who had initially viewed him with suspicion. Violet flourished as a teacher, eventually being named co-headmistress when Miss Winters decided to reduce her responsibilities. The school expanded to accommodate the growing town, adding a second classroom and hiring another teacher for the youngest students. Their courtship progressed with deliberate care, both Adam and Violet conscious of the wounds visible and invisible that needed healing. They built their relationship on mutual respect and honest communication, sharing painful parts of their pasts that helped explain the people they had become. Adam spoke of his time as a Texas Ranger, of a wife and child lost to fever while he was pursuing outlaws along the Mexican border. The grief and guilt that had driven him to bounty hunting, seeking justice for others when he couldn't save his own family. Violet revealed the full extent of her time at the Silver Dollar, the humiliations, the fear, the moments of despair when ending her life seemed the only escape. She spoke of her parents, hardworking people who had raised her with love and dreams of education, never imagining she would end up so far from home in such desperate circumstances. Each confidence strengthened their bond, each shared sorrow somehow lightening both their burdens. By spring, Adam had built a modest home at the edge of town, with a view of the mountains and room for a garden that Violet tended with growing expertise. In May of 1880, they were married in the town's small church, with Miss Winters standing as Violet's witness and Sheriff Davis as Adam's. The celebration afterward included nearly the entire town, many of whom had witnessed their story from its dramatic beginnings. At the reception, Dr. Granger raised a toast that brought tears to many eyes, to second chances and new beginnings. May we all find the courage to reach for them and the wisdom to recognize when they are offered. Later, as they danced under lantern light in the town square, Adam held Violet close, still marveling at the journey that had brought them together. "You ever think about that night?" he asked quietly. "When I first saw you in the storage room," Violet nodded against his shoulder. "Often. I wonder what made you intervene when so many others had looked away." "I'd like to claim some noble instinct," Adam admitted, "but the truth is simpler. I saw your eyes terrified but still defiant. Something in me recognized something in you. The rest just followed naturally." "Naturally," she echoed with a soft laugh. "Nothing about our beginning was natural or easy, Adam Lawson." "The beginning doesn't matter as much as what follows," he replied, brushing his lips against her forehead. "And what follows for us, Violet Lawson, will be a lifetime of making sure neither of us ever feels trapped or powerless again." It was a promise he would keep through the years that followed, through the birth of their children, through challenges and joys, through the continued growth of Marysville from rough frontier town to thriving community. 5 years later, Violet stood on the porch of their expanded home, watching Adam teach their 4-year-old son Michael to ride his first pony while their 2-year-old daughter Catherine clung to her skirts. The bruises that had once marked her arms were long faded, replaced by the occasional scrape or bump earned through living fully and fearlessly. Her teaching position had evolved into establishing a proper academy for older students preparing for college or careers, while Adam had been elected sheriff following Davis's retirement. Their home had become a gathering place for town celebrations and a safe harbor for those in need, particularly women seeking escape from difficult situations. "Mama, look," Michael called proudly as he balanced momentarily without Adam's supporting hand. "I'm doing it myself. I see you, darling." She called back, her heart full. Adam looked up, meeting her eyes across the yard with the same warmth that had sustained them through every challenge. In that moment, as in countless others before, Violet marveled at how completely her life had transformed from that desperate night in the Silver Dollar storage room. She had gone from a woman with bruises on her arms and fear in her heart to one surrounded by love and purpose, all because a stranger had looked at her suffering and simply said, "You're done working for him." Those words had broken her chains, but it was her own courage and Adam's steadfast faith that had truly set her free. Together, they had built something neither had believed possible, not just a life free from fear, but one rich with joy, purpose, and the deepest kind of love, the kind that heals wounds rather than inflicting them. As the Montana sunset painted the sky in brilliant hues, Violet silently thanked the fates that had brought them together, knowing that some journeys, no matter how painfully they begin, lead exactly where they are meant to.